My fingers still shake when I trace the bruises on my arms, purple and yellow reminders of what happened 5 days ago. I'm Dorothy Chen, 71 years old, and I never imagined my life would come to this standing in my own bathroom, documenting injuries inflicted by my own daughter. For 38 years, I was a librarian at Riverside Public Library in Oregon. I helped thousands of people find the books they needed, taught computer classes to seniors, and organized reading programs for children. My patrons called me Ms. Dorothy, and I wore that title with pride. When I retired 4 years ago, I envisioned peaceful days, gardening, volunteering, and spending time with family. Instead, I became a prisoner in my own home. My daughter Sarah is 38. She lost her position as an office manager when her company downsized. Her husband Marcus worked in retail, but his hours were unpredictable. They struggled for months before asking to move in temporarily. How could I say no? This was my child, my only daughter. But somewhere between moving in and settling down, they stopped being grateful guests and started treating me like hired help. The change was gradual, almost invisible at first, a forgotten dish here, an undone chore there. Then came the demands, the expectations, the cold looks when I didn't meet their standards. Last Tuesday, everything exploded. I had forgotten to buy the specific brand of coffee Sarah wanted. She screamed at me for 20 minutes. When I tried to explain I had bought a similar brand, she grabbed my wrist and twisted it until I cried out. Marcus just stood there, scrolling on his phone. That's when I knew I had to change something. But what could a 71-year-old woman do against two people who had taken over her home, her life, her dignity? This is my story of how I went from victim to victor, from doormat to warrior. It's about discovering strength you never knew you had and learning that it's never too late to reclaim your life. What happened next shocked everyone who knew me, including myself. Before I continue, I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever felt powerless in your own home? What would you do in my situation? And if you're new here, subscribe to Elder Voices channel for real stories of people over 60 who refuse to give up. Hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss what happens next. Looking back now, I can see exactly where things started going wrong. But when you're living through it day by day, the abuse creeps up so slowly that you don't realize you're drowning until you can't breathe. It started 18 months ago when Sarah and Marcus first asked to stay with me. We were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown, just the three of us. Sarah had been unusually quiet all evening, barely touching her pasta. Then Marcus cleared his throat and said they needed to discuss something important. Their landlord was selling their apartment building. They had 60 days to find a new place, but rent prices had skyrocketed. With Sarah's unemployment and Marcus's reduced hours, they couldn't afford anything decent. "We thought maybe, just temporarily, we could stay with you, Mum," Sarah said, her eyes not quite meeting mine. My house was indeed spacious for one person, a 3-bedroom craftsman with a large backyard that I had shared with my late husband Raymond. He had passed 8 years ago, and the house often felt too quiet, too empty. Having family around seemed like it might fill that void. "Of course you can stay," I told them. The smile Sarah gave me that night should have been my first warning. It was triumphant rather than grateful, as if she had won something rather than received help. They moved in 3 weeks later with 2 moving trucks full of belongings, more than you'd expect from a small apartment. I said nothing, wanting to be accommodating. The first month was actually pleasant. We established routines that seemed to work. I'd prepare breakfast before they left for job hunting and work. We'd have dinner together most evenings. Marcus would occasionally help with yard work. Sarah would sometimes wash dishes or vacuum. But by the second month, Their contributions vanished like morning mist. Marcus stopped offering to help with anything. Sarah began leaving messes everywhere, dishes in the sink, clothes on the bathroom floor, makeup scattered across the counter. When I gently mentioned it, Sarah snapped, "I'm working now, Mum. I don't have energy to clean when I get home." That's when the shift happened. Subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. I was no longer the homeowner graciously hosting her daughter. I was becoming the live-in help. What would you have done at this point? Would you have confronted them or kept the peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for the next part, where things take a darker turn. The morning I found the list, I had just returned from my weekly library volunteer session. I still went every Wednesday to help with the children's reading hour. It was one of the few things I had refused to give up. My small rebellion against the shrinking boundaries of my life. The paper was taped to the refrigerator with blue painter's tape, impossible to miss. Dorothy's Weekly Schedule read the title, printed in Sarah's neat handwriting. My hands trembled as I read. Monday, laundry, all household, bathroom cleaning, meal prep. Tuesday, grocery shopping, floor cleaning, iron clothes. Wednesday, window washing, dusting, special dinner preparation. Thursday, deep kitchen cleaning, organize pantry, bedsheet changing. Friday, general tidying, vacuum all rooms, prepare weekend meals. Saturday, yard work, complete house cleaning. Sunday, meal prep for the week, household organizing. At the bottom, in red ink, please complete all tasks by 5 p.m. each day. I stood staring at that list for what felt like hours. My daughter had created a chore schedule for me in my own home, as if I were an employee needing supervision. The humiliation burned through my chest like acid. When Sarah came home that evening, I confronted her, the list clutched in my shaking hand. She barely glanced up from her phone. "Oh, that. Marcus and I made it. We thought it would help you stay organized." "Structure?" Her eyes hardened. "No, you're not. A housekeeper would get paid. Your family contributing to the household. Mum, be realistic, you're home all day anyway. What else are you doing? We're working, earning money, paying bills." My voice rose, surprising both of us. "Your house that you could barely afford before we moved in," Sarah shot back. "Who do you think has been paying the property taxes, the insurance, the repairs? We've been covering most expenses for months. Letting me stay, in my own home. The home Raymond and I had bought 35 years ago. The home where I had raised Sarah, where I had nursed Raymond through his final illness, where every corner held memories of my life. But Sarah was already walking away, dismissing me as if the conversation were over. This is where most people would have given up. But I'm not most people. What happened next will shock you. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss part 4. That night, I couldn't sleep. Was that true? I needed to know exactly where I stood financially. At 4 a.m., I finally gave up on sleep and went to my desk. I pulled out my checkbook, bank statements, and bills from the past year. What I discovered made my blood run cold. When Sarah and Marcus first moved in, we had agreed they'd contribute $800 monthly toward utilities and groceries, a fair amount that would help without being burdensome. I had been transferring money regularly to a joint household account we had set up for shared expenses. But as I traced through the statements, I found something disturbing. The joint account had been draining my retirement savings, charges I didn't recognize, expensive dinners out, online shopping, subscription services I'd never approved. Sarah had somehow gained full access and was treating it like her personal account. Worse, I discovered that my monthly pension deposit $2,400, had been redirected to this joint account 3 months ago. I had been so distracted by the daily demands and criticisms that I hadn't noticed. They were taking my entire income. I checked my personal account. The balance that should have been healthy was down to $847. My savings account, which I had carefully built over decades, had been reduced from $43,000 to $12,000. They had been systematically draining me. I sat at that desk as sunrise painted the walls gold, papers spread before me, understanding the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about household chores or disrespect. This was financial abuse. They were deliberately impoverishing me, making me dependent, stripping away my options to leave or resist. When Sarah came down for breakfast at 7 a.m., I was waiting at the kitchen table with the bank statements spread out before me. "We need to talk about money," I said quietly. She glanced at the papers and shrugged. "You've been taking money from the household account." "We've been paying for this household, Mom." "Compensation? With my own money?" She poured herself coffee with infuriating casualness. "That's dramatic. You must have signed something. Besides, we need it to maintain this house." The gaslighting was breathtaking. She was rewriting reality right before my eyes, making me question my own memory and perception. I was trapped financially, emotionally, and physically. But I was about to discover that desperation can breed unexpected courage. Subscribe now for part 5, where everything changes. The confrontation about money changed the atmosphere in my house completely. Before, there had been at least a veneer of civility, a pretense that we were family working together. After that morning, the masks came off. Sarah and Marcus stopped pretending. They spoke to me with open contempt, treating me like an inconvenient burden they were forced to tolerate. The casual cruelty became part of daily life. "Dorothy, this bathroom is disgusting," Sarah would announce, inspecting my cleaning work like a drill sergeant. "Do it again." Marcus developed a habit of leaving messes, deliberately spilling things, scattering belongings, tracking mud through the house, then watching with amusement as I cleaned up after him. "That's what you're here for," he said once, when I looked at him with exhausted frustration. But the worst part was how they spoke about me when they thought I couldn't hear. I was in my bedroom one evening when I heard them laughing in the living room. "Your mum is so pathetic," Marcus said. Sarah laughed. "She's always been weak. My whole childhood, she let everyone walk all over her. My dad, her boss, everyone." Hearing my daughter talk about me that way, it broke something inside me that I didn't know could break. The physical abuse started small. Sarah grabbing my arm too hard when she wanted my attention. Marcus pushing past me roughly in the hallway. Accidental bumps that left bruises. They were testing boundaries, seeing how far they could go. Then came the day Sarah threw a coffee mug past my head because I had used the wrong type of milk in her latte. It shattered against the wall, missing me by inches. She didn't apologize. She just said, "Clean that up." I started keeping my phone with me constantly, documenting everything. Photos of bruises, recordings of their verbal abuse, screenshots of the unauthorized bank transactions. I didn't know what I would do with this evidence, but some instinct told me I'd need it. My sister Linda, who lives 2 hours away in Seattle, started noticing changes when we talked on the phone. "Dorothy, you sound different." I wanted to tell her everything, but Sarah monitored my calls now, always hovering nearby. "I'm fine," I'd say. But I wasn't fine. I was disappearing, piece by piece, day by day. The confident librarian who had once commanded respect from an entire community was becoming a ghost in her own home. I didn't know how much more I could take, but I was about to discover my breaking point. What happened next changed everything. The moment that forced me to fight back is coming in part 6. Don't miss it, subscribe, and turn on notifications now. It happened on a Thursday evening in late September. The day had been particularly difficult. Sarah had criticized every meal I prepared, and Marcus had accidentally knocked over a full laundry basket I had just folded, scattering clean clothes across the dirty floor. I was exhausted, emotionally and physically. At 8 p.m., I went to my room early, hoping to avoid more confrontation. But an hour later, Sarah burst through my door without knocking. She demanded. "I closed that account this morning," I said quietly. I had finally done it, gone to the bank and shut down the joint account they'd been draining. I opened a new one in my name only. Her face went purple with rage. "It's my money, Sarah." "Stealing! Stealing! You ungrateful—" She lunged at me, grabbing my shoulders and shaking me hard. "We've been supporting you, giving you a purpose." I tried to push her away, but she was stronger and younger. She shoved me backward, and I fell against my nightstand, pain exploding through my hip. She screamed. He appeared in the doorway, and what I saw in his eyes terrified me. Not concern, not surprise calculation. "She closed our account," Sarah told him. Marcus walked toward me slowly as I tried to stand up. "That wasn't very smart, Dorothy. We've been very patient with you." "This is my home," I managed to say, my voice shaking. Sarah laughed, but it was a cold, cruel sound. "We're not going anywhere. You are. Tomorrow, we're taking you to Meadowbrook Senior Living." "You can't do that. I don't need assisted living." "You're showing signs of dementia, Mum. Forgetfulness, confusion, inability to manage finances." Her smile was poisonous. "That's what we'll tell them." The realization hit me like ice water. They had planned this. They were going to have me declared incompetent, put me in a facility, and take my house. "Over my dead body," I whispered. "That can be arranged too," Marcus said quietly. The threat hung in the air. I saw my future clearly institutionalized against my will, my home stolen, my money drained, possibly worse. These people, this daughter I had raised, were capable of anything. That night, I knew I had to act, but I had no idea that help would come from the most unexpected source. Everything changes in Part 7. The turning point you've been waiting for is next. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed, my hip throbbing from where I'd fallen, my mind racing through possible escape routes. But every option seemed impossible. I had no money they hadn't taken. My car was registered in the joint name I shared with Sarah. I had nowhere to go. At 6 a.m., there was a knock on my door. Not Sarah's demanding bang, but a gentle tap. "Miss Dorothy?" Keisha Thompson was my neighbor's daughter, a nursing student who sometimes visited her mother next door. She was 24, bright, and always kind when we crossed paths. I opened the door, trying to hide my puffy eyes and bruised hip. "Keisha? I need to talk to you." Her face was serious, worried. Once inside with the door closed, she turned to me. "Miss Dorothy, I was at my mum's last night, studying on her back porch. Your bedroom window was open." My heart stopped. "I heard your daughter threaten you. I heard her plan to put you in a home against your will." She pulled out her phone. I recorded it. Tears sprang to my eyes. "You don't have to say anything." "But Miss Dorothy, this is elder abuse. What they're doing is illegal." "But she's my daughter." "That doesn't give her the right to hurt you." "Miss Dorothy, you taught me to read when I was 6 years old at the library's summer program. You stayed late every Tuesday to help me with my homework when my mum was working double shifts." Her eyes were fierce. "I already talked to my mum, Mrs. Patterson from across the street, and Mr. Rodriguez from the corner house. We've all noticed changes in you over the past year. We've all been worried. For the first time in months, I felt something other than fear and despair. I felt hope. I asked. Keisha smiled. First, we document everything. Then, we get you a lawyer. My cousin Gerald is a family law attorney and he owes me a favor. But most importantly, Ms. The community was rallying, but Sarah and Marcus weren't going to give up without a fight. Part 8 reveals the plan that changed everything. Subscribe now. Over the next 3 days, I became part of a secret operation run from Keisha's mother's kitchen. It felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than my real life. But it was necessary. Gerald Martinez, Keisha's cousin, came to meet me on Saturday afternoon while Sarah and Marcus were out shopping. He was in his 30s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that immediately put me at ease. Ms. Chen, I've reviewed the evidence Keisha sent me, he said, spreading documents across the kitchen table. What's happening to you constitutes financial elder abuse, emotional abuse, and assault. But she's my daughter, I said again, the words automatic. And that makes what she's doing worse, not better, Gerald said gently. Ms. Chen, I need you to understand something. Your daughter and son-in-law are criminals. They've stolen tens of thousands of dollars from you. They've physically harmed you. They've threatened to falsely commit you to take your property. Hearing it stated so plainly broke through the fog of denial I'd been living in. First, we secure your assets. I've already drafted paperwork to freeze any remaining joint accounts and establish you as sole owner of your home, which you already are legally, but we're making it bulletproof. Second, we document everything. I nodded, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. Good. We'll use those. Third, we get you somewhere safe before we serve them with eviction papers and restraining orders. She can stay with me, Keisha's mother, Mrs. Thompson, said firmly. She had been listening from the doorway. We'll do this properly and legally, Gerald continued. But Ms. Chen, I need to prepare you when we serve these papers. They will be angry, very angry. We spent the next 2 hours planning every detail. Gerald would file the emergency restraining order on Monday morning. The sheriff's department would serve Sarah and Marcus with eviction papers, giving them 72 hours to vacate. I would move out Sunday night while they slept, taking only my essential documents and personal items. What about my things? I asked. We'll arrange for a supervised moving period where you can retrieve everything under police protection, Gerald assured me. That night, I packed a small bag. Clothes, medications, my wedding album, my late husband's watch. It felt like leaving my whole life behind, because in a way I was. The woman who had let herself be abused, who had stayed silent, she was being left behind. Sunday night, everything changed. The moment I took back My Life Is Coming in Part 9, you won't believe what happened next. Subscribe now. Sunday night at 2 a.m., I crept through my own house like a thief. Sarah and Marcus were asleep in what used to be my guest room, their snores audible through the walls. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. Keisha was waiting in her car at the end of the driveway, lights off. I had one bag of essentials and a folder containing copies of all my important documents. Gerald had advised me to keep the originals in a safe deposit box, which I'd done that afternoon while Sarah was at work. My hands trembled as I locked my front door, possibly for the last time as a resident. 43 years in this house, and I was sneaking away in the middle of the night. You okay, Ms.? Keisha whispered as I slid into her car. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears streaming down my face. Mrs. Thompson was waiting when we arrived, her guest room already prepared with fresh linens, flowers on the nightstand, and a cup of chamomile tea steaming on the bedside table. "You're safe now," she said, embracing me. But I didn't feel safe. I felt terrified. What would happen when Sarah discovered I was gone? What would she do? I got my answer at 8:30 Monday morning. My phone began ringing Sarah's number. I didn't answer. Then Marcus. "Dorothy, you're acting crazy." Gerald had warned me not to respond, not to engage in any way. But every message felt like a knife twist. Despite everything, this was still my daughter. The baby I had nursed, the child I had comforted through nightmares, the teenager I had helped through heartbreak. At 10 a.m., Gerald called. "The restraining orders have been approved. The sheriff is serving them now. You need to prepare yourself. They're going to try to contact you, to manipulate you." An hour later, Sarah found a way to call from a different number. I made the mistake of answering. She screamed, "How dare you? We opened our lives to you, and this is how you repay us." "It's my home, Sarah," I said quietly. "You'll regret this. You'll die alone in that house. You miserable old—" I hung up. Then I blocked the number. Then I cried for an hour. But I didn't go back. The legal battle was just beginning. But so was my healing. Part 10 reveals what happened when I finally faced them in court. Subscribe to see justice served. The temporary restraining order hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Gerald warned me that Sarah and Marcus would be there, that I would have to face them, that they would likely try to paint me as confused, senile, vindictive. "They're going to say you're mentally unfit," he explained during our preparation meeting. "They're going to claim they were caring for you out of love." "But we have evidence," I said. "We do. We have Keisha's recording, your bank statements, photos of your bruises, testimony from neighbors. But I need you to be strong in there." Could I? I honestly didn't know, but I had to try. The morning of the hearing, Mrs. Thompson helped me dress in a simple navy suit, the one I used to wear for parent-teacher conferences. "You look like the professional woman you are," she said. "Remember that. You're not a victim." The courthouse was cold, institutional. When I saw Sarah and Marcus in the hallway outside the courtroom, my breath caught. Sarah looked immaculate in a designer dress I didn't recognize, probably bought with my stolen money. Marcus wore a suit that almost made him look respectable. Sarah saw me, and her face transformed. She called out, rushing toward me, "Mum, please, can we just talk? This is all a misunderstanding." Gerald stepped between us. "Ms." Sarah shrieked. The bailiff intervened, and Sarah was forced back. But as she retreated, she looked at me with such hatred that I physically recoiled. The mask had slipped again. Inside the courtroom, I watched as Gerald systematically presented our case. The bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals, the photos of my bruises, Keisha's testimony about what she had witnessed, her recording of Sarah's threats. Sarah's attorney tried to counter. "Ms. Chen is elderly and confused. She willingly gave her daughter access to her accounts. She's misremembering incidents, seeing malice where there was only care." Then it was my turn to testify. I walked to the stand on shaking legs, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Sarah's attorney questioned me aggressively, trying to confuse me, to make me seem unreliable. But Gerald had prepared me well. I answered each question clearly, calmly, with specific dates and details. When I described the night Sarah attacked me, the courtroom went silent. Even the judge looked shocked. "Mrs." The verdict came next, and it changed everything. Part 11 reveals the judgment that set me free. Make sure you're subscribed, you won't want to miss this. Judge Patricia Morrison was in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes, that seemed to see through every lie. After hearing all the testimony, she reviewed her notes in silence for what felt like an eternity. "I've been a family court judge for 23 years, she finally said. She looked directly at Sarah and Marcus. "Ms. Williams, Mr. Williams, you moved into your mother's home under the guise of temporary financial hardship. Instead of gratitude, you showed entitlement. Instead of contribution, you showed exploitation." Sarah started to speak, but the judge held up her hand. "The evidence is overwhelming. The bank records, the recordings, the testimony of multiple witnesses, and Ms. Chen's own documented injuries tell a clear story of elder abuse." She signed documents as she spoke. "The temporary restraining order is hereby made permanent for a period of 5 years. Ms. Williams and Mr. Williams are prohibited from contacting Ms. Furthermore," Judge Morrison continued, "I am ordering immediate repayment of the misappropriated funds. Based on the financial records presented, Ms. Williams and Mr. Williams should return $31,000 to Ms. Chen within 90 days. Sarah's face went white. Marcus grabbed her arm, whispering urgently. "Finally," the judge said, her voice softening as she looked at me. "Ms. Chen, I want to commend your courage. It takes tremendous strength to stand up to family members, especially one's own children. You did the right thing." As we left the courtroom, Sarah screamed after me, "You're dead to me! You hear me?" But her words had no power anymore. Gerald walked beside me, Keisha and her mother on my other side, a community of support surrounding me. "It's over," Gerald said. Was I? Legally, yes. But emotionally, the wounds would take longer to heal. I had lost my daughter not to death, but to something darker. The child I raised had become someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of cruelty I never imagined. But I had also gained something: myself, my dignity, my home, my independence. That night, Mrs. Thompson threw me a small celebration. Just neighbors and friends, people who had stood by me. But this wasn't quite the end. Part 12 reveals what happened when I returned home and what I did to truly reclaim my life. Subscribe for the final chapter. 3 days after the court hearing, with Gerald and 2 sheriff's deputies present, I returned to my house. I wasn't sure what to expect. Would it be trashed? Vandalized? The deputies entered first, checking every room. "All clear," one called out. "Relatively" was accurate. Most things were where I'd left them, but there were small acts of spite. Family photos turned face down, my favorite coffee mug smashed in the sink, crude words written in marker on the bathroom mirror. But it was still my home, and it was mine again. Over the next weeks, I began the process of reclaiming not just my house, but my life. I changed all the locks first. Then I repainted the walls, choosing colors I loved, not the neutrals Sarah had insisted on. I rearranged furniture, threw out things that reminded me of those dark months, and gradually made the house feel like mine again. The settlement of $31,000 came in installments over 3 months. Gerald pursued it relentlessly, threatening criminal charges until Sarah and Marcus paid every penny. With that money, I rebuilt my depleted savings and felt financially secure again. But the deeper healing took longer. I started therapy with Dr. Patricia Reeves, a counselor specializing in family trauma and elder abuse. Through our sessions, I began to understand how I had been manipulated, how the abuse had been deliberate and systematic, and most painfully, how I had to grieve the daughter I thought I had. "She may have been that person once," Dr. Reeves told me gently, "but people change. Sometimes they become someone we don't recognize." I rejoined my volunteer work at the library with renewed purpose. I started a support group for seniors who had experienced family abuse, discovering I wasn't alone in my experience. Many older adults suffer in silence, ashamed to admit their own children mistreat them. 6 months later, I received a letter from Sarah. It was forwarded through Gerald's office to avoid violating the restraining order. In it, she apologized, sort of. She asked if we could reconcile. I read it twice, then filed it away without responding. Maybe one day, years from now, if she does real work on herself and makes genuine amends, we might have some kind of relationship. But that day isn't today. Maybe it never will be. Today, I'm 72 years old. I wake up in my own home, make my coffee the way I like it, and spend my days as I choose. I'm surrounded by a community that values and respects me. I'm financially secure. I'm physically safe. I'm free. Thank you for following my story. Have you learned something from my experience? Drop a comment below and subscribe to Elder Voices for more real stories of survival and strength.